Hi everyone. Today I have a guided EFT process for releasing overwhelm, specifically emotional overwhelm. Because in my experience, all overwhelm can be traced back to some form of emotional holding, emotional hoarding, like hoarding signals, energetic signals, hoarding emotional signals that we've been experiencing from triggered by some of the challenges or some of the things that we're going through in our pathway. And instead of finding healthy expression for them, there's this kind of learned impulse or learned behavior to hold on to some of these charges without finding the safety and grounding to release them healthily, right? So I'm not saying release them by like acting out or like, projecting them. I mean that finding a healthy form of self-expression and allowing some of these charged, heavy emotions and signals to be able to flow as if they are debris being carried by the river's currents, right? So just kind of like allowing it to flow so that it doesn't get clogged anywhere. Because let's face it, if we live long enough, we're going to have some flotsam and debris in our life that we're going to have to clean up eventually. And sometimes we're not ready to fully do that yet. And sometimes it's, the more we live, the more the more junk we got to clean up. Sorry, I'm feeling super silly. I don't know if it's a full moon or what, you guys. Anyway, so releasing overwhelm. So this is one of the techniques that I use for myself to help me release that tightness, that collapse, that drained experiences that come from like being overwhelmed by the overwhelm, being smothered by it. So this is something that I developed in order to help me not get to that level, or to help me free myself from that state. If, let's say, learned behaviors or learned patterns kind of find a way to trap me in those, in their old shenanigans again. For me, overwhelm looks like or feels like a child having a tantrum. And if you're able to observe a child having a tantrum without it affecting you too much, you'll be able to notice that there's something inside the child that has a need. There is a need or something that wants to be expressed through them that has not been able to come out properly, that has not been able to come out in a way that is compassionate or is safe. And so the nervous system will find a way. The nervous system will find a way to kind of release the charge, or do something with it when it gets to a certain weight, to a certain heaviness, a certain density. So when we're able to observe it from that perspective, we're able to see it as a signal for stuck energy. Specifically, I like to see it as stuck creative energy, because it's through creative self-expression that we can activate the channels for release and the channels for embodiment. Because sometimes there's something in there that needs to be just let go of. And sometimes there's something in there, like a lesson that we learned from like a challenge that we just overcome, or something that we gleaned from an experience that we just went through. There's something that needs to kind of integrate into our system and become part of the way we carry ourselves through life. So that's embodiment. And creative self-expression in my frameworks allow for both release and embodiment to happen. From that perspective, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's almost like a signal for me to like tap into or take care of my capacity to creatively express myself, because that's just one way I redirect the focus. If I am feeling super stuck or really feeling low from overwhelm, I will give myself time to feel that lowness, I will give myself time to have like my little tantrum if I need to have it. And I usually do it. I try to do it as quietly and as privately as possible because personally, I don't like having tantrums in front of other people. I don't get any medicine from that. I do appreciate when there are people in my life who want me to feel safe with them and want me to express some of these things to them, not because they want to see me in pain, but because they just want to be like, hey, Dhiyanah, my space is your space. When I have that capacity, my space can be your space. So I acknowledge that I do have loved ones in my life who encourage me to express these parts of myself to them, and I appreciate that. But I don't show them the raw sides. I try not to, for me, because that's happened quite a lot without my consent, just from having gone through really severe health issues and even like severe mental health episodes. Since that has happened without my consent, as I'm healing now, it's really important for me to be like, here's what I choose to share with you, right? So as a person who has reclaimed her agency in her life, that's really important for me to be able to choose. So it is also really important to learn how to choose what I do with overwhelm so that it does not get to that stage where it is controlling me. And when it's almost like, being like thrown in the middle of the ocean and the waves are choppy, you can do so little about that. So it's the practice of knowing how to read the surface of the water so that when you go inside the water for a swim or for a dip, you're doing it because the water is calm and you know you're going to enjoy yourself rather than throwing yourself into choppy waves or being thrown into chopping waves by something outside of your control. So for me, that's an illustration of my experience with overwhelm. And one thing that came through as I was preparing for this is that overwhelm can be seen as a big signal for change, that changes are happening. And in this way, from this perspective, the charge of overwhelm can neutralize into something that is less hostile to work with. To be able to acknowledge that you're feeling overwhelmed and to be able to say, there's something that's changing for me right now. Maybe it's how I hold my emotions in my body. Maybe some of my coping mechanisms need to change because they're no longer working. Maybe I'm a different person. That happens. That happens on the spiritual self-healing journey. It's like you end up shedding skins and you end up like having to get to know the new person that you yourself are. And I find that overwhelm can be a signal for that, because the charge of the overwhelm can happen when like a part of your past self that has been programmed to revolt against change, to kind of like to resist it or to see it as a threat, that might come up. It's like your internal security guard that might come up as well, to kind of challenge the newness, to challenge what's happening, to challenge the things that are changing. And this usually happens in the liminal space between like something that has the old that has been released and the new that is being created. And this liminal space is a metaphysical training ground. This is where all the metaphysics of transformation happens. This is where that happens. It's in the interactions between you and your past selves, and how you approach that, how you hold space for that. That influences the timelines that you are creating or entering for yourself in your personal trajectories. It can also influence the linearity of your life. So all that liminal space, metaphysics stuff is happening in the intuitive, multidimensional reality. And in the linear, sequential reality, what am I trying to say with this? It's so in the linear sequential reality, how you choose to hold space for what's going on energetically in the liminal space impacts impacts your relationship with the past in linear time. It's kind of like, as an example, it's kind of like trauma. It's kind of like how trauma is an incomplete cycle, an extraordinary event outside of your control that has taken you away from a particular sequence and is not being resolved. And that creates a trauma loop in the brain. So that every single time a trigger happens, when you encounter a trigger, you're kind of like, your nervous system is time traveling back into the past and reliving some of those sensations and moments of that unresolved moment. So it's like a trauma loop. To resolve it, there are all these modalities to learn how to find resolution for that moment. And that helps you release the charge of trauma, right? So like, you don't change the tragedy of it. You don't change what really happened, the facts of it. You change how it lives in your personal narrative. And you change how it influences your inner landscape so that it no longer is a trauma loop. So it's no longer like a tornado or a storm. And it could just be like a slightly wounded, scarred terrain in your inner landscape. So it changes. It goes through a transformation when the energetic charge of it is able to find a resolution. And it's kind of similar with overwhelm. Overwhelm there's a loop that is created as well with overwhelm. It's not so much, I wouldn't say it is traumatic, although it can be. I will say that it is challenging for sure if you don't know what to do with overwhelm. And that's why overwhelm can trigger these really severe mental health and health episodes and flare-ups. So knowing what to do with overwhelm, how to sit with it, is for me, it's a really important skill to have just in general, but especially if you are experiencing heightened sensitivities, or if you were born as a highly sensitive in this world. This world can get overwhelming super easily, like ridiculously easily. And we need the tools to be able to remind ourselves, to remind the parts of our brain that panic under the weight of overwhelm, to just be like, hey, it's okay to feel this, and it's okay to move away from this feeling. So we're going to go through a process of acknowledging overwhelm, of acknowledging the negative and heavy stuff, and then of taking a pause to just come back to the present moment, because this is how the energetic charges find resolution. To go through a sequential process, where we acknowledge the truth of what we're feeling, and then we come back to the present moment and we acknowledge the truth about the present moment. And maybe in that moment, we also acknowledge the truth about what we want or what we don't want to experience, just to be able to find a way to articulate some of our internal boundaries, the boundaries that we have with our inner realms, with our subtle bodies and the energetics of all these multidimensional planes. And we affirm something life-giving and something positive. That's where we land. That's where we make a home in, right? So we start with the negative because we don't want to leave out the truth of our experiences. And then we come into the truth of our present moment, of feeling safe, even if you're only safe in the moment where you're tapping and breathing, to just fully and completely acknowledge the safety of that present moment, and then to expand your capacity to feel the peace of that safety, of that security, and land and ground that in an affirmation. Ground that in something life-giving, something nourishing. And for me, this is how I'm going to be taking you guys through the sequence of this tapping. And you can use this tapping repeatedly if you need to, twice or 3 times, if it's a really heavy, overwhelmed charge. And my intention for this is for this sequence to be grounding and calming. Because what I've noticed in my journey of finding ways to stay grounded on planet Earth is that when I'm more welcoming to practices, patterns, and even thought patterns that calm me down, that give me that make my heart beat, like, you know, beat steadily, that make my mind feel like calm water, that make my limbs feel lighter, my joints more relaxed, and not holding much, they're not holding on tightly. When I'm engaging with these things, I find that it's so easy for me to tap into earth energy and to ground in it. Even if I don't have access to, let's say, outdoor spaces where I can put my feet on the ground, this is just one way that I can ground into the earth energy that is inherently available in my body and in my heart. And from that place, I'm able to see certain things clearly. I'm able to make decisions, even if it's a decision to slow down and rest, so that I can make the decisions later. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're overwhelmed, you don't see that. You don't even see that you need rest in moments of really intense overwhelm. So my intention and my hope for this is that whoever finds this and whoever resonates with this sharing, for this to be a grounding and calming process, and you can use it whenever you need to, as and when needed. And this offering is offered with so much love and so much hope that we will all find ways to make friends with these more difficult experiences of being human. All right. Okay. So let's take a deep breath in and out. Just to get started, and we'll begin the EFT process by tapping on the karate chop point with these statements. Even though I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, I choose to honor how I feel and to unconditionally accept myself. Even though I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, I choose to honor how I feel and to unconditionally love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, I choose to honor how I feel and to show up as an unconditionally loving friend to myself. It is so hard. It feels unbearable. My body feels tight, sore, and drained. My mind feels like it's being attacked by my own thoughts. It feels like I'm collapsing under all this weight and all this pressure. And I don't know what to do because it's so hard to even just sit with these feelings. I don't know how to move on from this overwhelm. I feel so discouraged, like there is nowhere for me to go or no way for me to move forward from this. This overwhelm is so much to hold on to. And yet it feels like holding on to it is all I can do. It's as if my tight grip on this overwhelm helps me to feel in control of it. As if by putting all my focus on it, I can keep an eye on it, as if keeping it at bay. But if I truly had agency here, I would choose not to feel so burdened by this overwhelm. I would choose not to feel so drained and consumed by this pressure to stay hypervigilant with my own feelings. I acknowledge that holding on to this overwhelm has not allowed me the space to choose self-compassion. That I can barely think straight, let alone find or create solutions when I'm so focused on either running away from or fighting this overwhelm. I also notice that this feeling of overwhelm gets worse when I try to project it out, escape from it, or numb myself out from it. It's so confusing trying to figure out what to do with all these heavy emotions. And that's okay. It's okay that I feel so overwhelmed sometimes that I can't feel anything else. It's okay that I don't know what to do about it. What I do know is that I don't want to give myself a hard time for experiencing overwhelm, because it's part of life. It's part of having and working with emotions. And I know from experience that it is not always a negative or bad or difficult thing to feel deeply and greatly. I know also that I don't want to disconnect from the clarity of my feelings. I don't want moments of overwhelm to convince me to run away from my truth. I know that I want to find healthy, kind, and gentle ways to support myself as I go through challenging moments of overwhelm. And I can begin here slowly. I can begin by taking some time now, as I keep tapping, to just notice my breath and my body. Gathering my attention back from all corners of time and space, I focus on the present moment right here, right now. Acknowledging how I've been feeling the past few days. Acknowledging the fullness of my presence here and now, in my mind, in the body, in my heart, in my soul, and in spirit. In this moment right now, I acknowledge that I am safe. I am safe in the company of my own self. I am safe in the flow of my feelings and emotions. I am safe in my desire to feel better about the ups and downs that I go through in this life. It is safe for me to acknowledge my thoughts and feelings at any moment at all. And when I'm ready to, it is safe for me to let them all go. To let go of my vigilant stance on my own emotions, knowing that my emotions are mine to feel and to flow with. I can trust in the ease that follows simple acts of self-compassion, like taking pauses throughout the day to slow down, tune in, and acknowledge how I'm doing. It's in these moments of cultivated presence that I will find the spaciousness I need to hold feelings of overwhelm with grace. And to find ways to let them go peacefully, instead of fighting against or running away from overwhelm. I choose to be kind to myself about what I'm going through. I choose to be a sacred and compassionate witness to the gifts, to the wonders, and even to the challenges of my reality. I choose to keep practicing self-compassion, especially when it feels difficult to. Because I know that the more I practice tuning in and witnessing my emotions, the easier it gets for me to find freedom and clarity with my self-expression. I choose to bring in more grounding and gentleness in my presence and into my present moment. I choose to hold myself in compassion and grace as I journey through challenging terrains so that I can come through the other side feeling more secure and more trusting in my own energies. I choose to practice being the love that I am in all moments, in all ways. And so it is. Let's take a deep breath in and out. And if you need to, if you feel like you need some extra relaxing or some extra grounding, you can replay that guided tapping one more time and see if that charge of stress or distress can be further calmed and neutralized so that you can rest and find some clarity and peace for your day ahead.